The black Bentley pulled up to the curb on a rain-soaked evening. Inside, Julian Sterling adjusted his tie and stared through the tinted window at the figure huddled in the doorway of an abandoned building. The man was wrapped in layers of dirty blankets, his face hidden beneath a tattered hood. A paper cup sat beside him, containing a few coins and a crumpled dollar bill. To anyone else, he was just another homeless man, invisible, forgotten, a piece of scenery in a city that had grown numb to suffering. But Julian knew better. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stepped out of the car. The cold rain immediately soaked through his expensive wool coat, but he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the figure before him. "Andrew," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The man stirred. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his head. The face that emerged from beneath the hood was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, covered in days of stubble. But the eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. They were the same bright blue eyes Julian had seen in his son's baby pictures, the same eyes that had once sparkled with mischief and ambition. "Dad." Andrew's voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. Julian stood frozen, his mind racing. It had been 3 years since he'd last seen his son. 3 years since he'd kicked him out of the house for refusing to join the family business. 3 years since he'd cut him off completely. "Been looking for you," Julian said, his voice trembling slightly. "For months. I hired private investigators. You hired people to find me." Andrew laughed bitterly, a sound that turned into a hacking cough. "Why? To finish the job, to make sure I was really suffering." "That's not," Julian started. "Save it." Andrew pulled the blanket tighter around himself. "You made your feelings very clear, Dad. Either I follow your plan or I'm dead to you. Well, I chose my own path, and you made sure I couldn't walk it." Julian felt the words like physical blows. He remembered that day clearly, the ultimatum he had given his only son on his 21st birthday. Join the company, take over the empire, live the life Julian had built for him, or walk away with nothing. Andrew had chosen to walk away. "I was trying to teach you a lesson," Julian said weakly, "about responsibility, about what it takes to succeed in this world." "I learned it," Andrew said, his voice growing stronger despite his weakened state. "I learned that your world has no room for people like me. People who want to paint, who want to write poetry, who want to help others instead of stepping on them to get ahead." Julian glanced at the paper cup on the ground. There was a small sketch on a scrap of paper beside it, a dragon beautifully drawn in charcoal. Even now, even in this state, his son was still creating. "You could have had everything," Julian said, his voice cracking. "A penthouse, money, a future. Instead, you chose this." "This isn't what I chose," Andrew said, looking up at his father with eyes that held no anger, only sadness. "This is what you forced on me. I wanted to be an artist. You called it a waste of time. I wanted to help people. You called it weakness. I wanted to be myself. You called it rebellion. So yes, I left. I walked away from your money, your house, your expectations. But you didn't stop there, did you, Dad?" Julian looked away, unable to meet his son's gaze. "You made sure I couldn't get a job anywhere in this city," Andrew continued. "Every bank refused me. Every landlord turned me away. You used your influence to destroy me, all because I refused to be your puppet." The rain continued to fall, cold and relentless. Julian felt it soaking through his clothes, but he barely noticed. All he could see was the wreckage of his son's life, a life he had systematically dismantled piece by piece. "I didn't think it would go this far," Julian whispered. "You didn't think," Andrew laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "That's the problem, Dad. You never think, you just act. You crush anything that doesn't fit your perfect little plan. You crushed Mom's spirit. You crushed my dreams, and now—" He gestured at himself with a weak wave of his hand. "Now you've crushed me completely." Julian felt tears prick at his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. The last time he had cried was at his wife's funeral 8 years ago. He had buried his grief along with her, throwing himself into work, into building the empire that had become his only comfort. But now, looking at his son, he realized what a hollow victory that empire had been. He had built a fortune but lost everything that mattered. "I can fix this," Julian said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. "I can give you money, I can buy you a house, I can." "No," Andrew shook his head firmly. "I don't want your money. I never wanted your money. I just wanted you to see me. Just once I wanted you to look at me and see your son, not another project to manage." "Andrew, please, go home, Dad." Andrew closed his eyes, exhaustion evident on his face. Go back to your penthouse, your board meetings, your perfect little world. I don't belong there. I never did." Julian stood in the rain for a long moment, watching his son's shivering form. He wanted to scoop him up, take him home, nurse him back to health. But Andrew had made his position clear. He wanted nothing from the man who had destroyed him. Slowly, Julian turned and walked back to his car. He got in, sat behind the wheel, and stared out the window at the figure in the doorway. He thought about the boy Andrew had been: bright, creative, full of life. He thought about how he had slowly extinguished that light piece by piece, with every criticism, every dismissal, every time he had made his son feel like he wasn't good enough. He started the engine and drove away. The image of his son's hollow face burned into his memory. That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He lay in his king-sized bed in his penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling, unable to stop thinking about the condition his son was in. Andrew was sick, that much was obvious. His cough was deep and rasping, his skin pale and clammy. He looked like he hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. Julian got up and paced the room. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights, thinking about all the people out there sleeping on the streets. He had never given them much thought before. They were just part of the scenery, invisible obstacles in his path to success. But now every homeless person he saw reminded him of Andrew. The next morning, Julian called his lawyer. "I want to find my son," he said. "I don't care what it costs. Hire the best investigators. Find him." "Sir," the lawyer said carefully, "I understand your concern, but you must remember that you legally severed all ties with Andrew 3 years ago. He forfeited his inheritance. He's no longer—" "I know what I did," Julian snapped. "Just find him." Investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, Julian's business suffered. He canceled meetings, missed deadlines, made mistakes that cost him millions, but he didn't care. All he could think about was Andrew. When the investigator finally called with news, Julian's hands shook as he answered the phone. "We found him, sir," the investigator said. "He's in a shelter downtown. He's very ill, pneumonia. The doctors say if he doesn't get proper treatment soon." "I'm on my way," Julian said. He drove to the shelter, a rundown building on the edge of the city. The smell of antiseptic and despair hit him as he walked through the doors. A nurse led him to a small room at the end of the hall. Andrew was lying on a cot, his face pale and sunken, an IV drip attached to his arm. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. "He's been like this for 3 days," the nurse said quietly. "He has pneumonia complicated by malnutrition. We're doing what we can, but he's very weak." Julian pulled up a chair and sat beside his son's bed. He took Andrew's hand, so thin and cold, and held it. "Here," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Andrew's eyes fluttered open. For a moment he looked confused, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. Then his gaze drifted to his father's face. "Dad," his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, son, I'm not leaving. I thought you'd be happy." Andrew's lips curved into a weak smile. "Finally got rid of me." "Never," Julian said, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. I thought I was teaching you responsibility, but I was just destroying you. I thought money and success were the only things that mattered, but they were nothing. You were the only thing that ever mattered." Andrew closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. "It's too late, Dad. It's all too late." "No, it's not," Julian insisted. "We can fix this. I'll get you the best doctors. I'll buy you a house, whatever you want. Just please, don't give up." Andrew was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so quiet Julian had to lean close to hear him. "You remember the dragon I drew when I was 8? Julian nodded, remembering the charcoal sketch his son had proudly shown him. A fierce, beautiful dragon soaring through storm clouds. "You said it was a waste of paper." Andrew's voice trembled. "You said I should draw something useful, a building, something that made money." "I was an idiot," Julian said. "It was a beautiful dragon, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." Andrew smiled, a real smile this time. "I drew that dragon because I was scared. I was scared of you, scared of your anger, scared I'd never be good enough. The dragon was me, Dad, wild and free, flying above everything. That's who I wanted to be." "You can still be that," Julian said desperately. "You can still look at me." Andrew gestured weakly at his emaciated body. "The dragon is dead. You killed him." The words hit Julian like a physical blow. He started to cry, the tears streaming down his face as he held his son's hand. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I should have told you I loved you. I should have believed in you. I should have been proud of you. Andrew opened his eyes again, looking at his father with a strange, peaceful expression. I forgive you, Dad. You shouldn't, Julian said, shaking his head. I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not, Andrew agreed. But I don't want to die angry. I don't want the last thing I feel to be hate. Don't talk like that, Julian said fiercely. You're going to get better. We're going to, Dad. Andrew squeezed his hand weakly. I'm tired, so tired. Can you just stay with me just until I fall asleep? Of course, Julian said, his voice breaking. I'll stay as long as you need me, as long as you want me. Andrew smiled again, his eyes slowly closing. I always wanted you, Dad. I just wanted you to love me the way I was, not the way you wanted me to be. Love you, Julian said, pressing his son's hand to his cheek. I love you so much, I always have. I was just too stupid to show it. But Andrew didn't answer. His breathing grew slower, more labored. The heart monitor beside the bed began to beep erratically. Andrew, Julian shouted. Andrew, stay with me. Nurse, someone help. Medical staff rushed into the room, pushing Julian aside. He watched in horror as they worked on his son, frantically trying to revive him. But it was too late. Andrew's heart had given out. Julian fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The world around him faded away, leaving only the unbearable weight of his grief. In the days that followed, Julian Sterling began to change. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, painful transformation, like a man waking from a long nightmare and realizing he doesn't recognize the person in the mirror. He sold his penthouse. He couldn't bear to look at the city from that height anymore, couldn't bear the thought that somewhere out there, someone like his son was suffering while he looked down from his ivory tower. He donated millions to homeless shelters across the city. He established the Andrew Sterling Foundation for the Homeless, an organization dedicated to helping people get back on their feet. He didn't just give money, though. He gave his time. He volunteered at the very shelter where Andrew had spent his last days. He served meals, helped people fill out paperwork, listened to their stories. I had a son once, he told a young man who was struggling to find work. He was an artist, the most brilliant artist I've ever known, and I drove him away because I was too blind to see his gift. Don't let anyone do that to you. Whatever your dream is, follow it. Don't let anyone stand in your way. Young man looked at him with surprise. Did you find him again? He asked. Julian nodded slowly. I did. Just before it was too late. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I loved him, and he forgave me. It wasn't too late then, the young man said. Yes, Julian said, tears forming in his eyes. It was. He died in my arms a few hours later, but I got to say goodbye. I got to hold his hand and tell him I was sorry, and I got to hear him say he forgave me. Young man was silent for a long moment. Lucky, he finally said. My father never even told me he was proud of me. He just disowned me when I told him I wanted to be a musician. I haven't seen him in 5 years. Julian put a hand on the young man's shoulder. Call him, he said. Call him right now. Don't wait. If you've learned anything from my story, learn this. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Tell him you love him. Even if he doesn't say it back, at least you'll know you tried. Young man nodded slowly, pulling out his phone. Julian watched as he dialed a number, his hands shaking. Dad, the young man said into the phone. It's me. I know we haven't talked in a long time, and I know I didn't exactly leave on good terms, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. And I love you. Julian turned away, wiping his eyes. He had learned his lesson too late to save his son, but he could still help others. He could still make sure that no other father made the same terrible mistake. 1 year later, Julian stood in front of a large mural that had been painted on the side of the Andrew Sterling Foundation building. The mural depicted a magnificent dragon soaring through a sky filled with stars. At the dragon's heart was a small, intricate symbol, a tiny, smiling face. It was the face of Andrew as a child. This is beautiful, a woman said, coming to stand beside him. Julian nodded. A local artist painted it. He said he wanted to honor Andrew's memory. I told him to paint the dragon. It was Andrew's favorite thing to draw. Woman was a reporter here to do a story on the foundation. Can you tell me about your son? She asked gently. Julian took a deep breath. My son was a dreamer, he said. He saw the world differently than other people. He saw beauty in things that most people overlook. He wanted to make the world a better place. And I tried to destroy that. I tried to make him into something he wasn't. I thought I was helping him. I thought I was teaching him the value of hard work, but I was just teaching him that he wasn't good enough. Now, Julian looked up at the dragon. Now I'm trying to be the father he deserved. I know it's too late to do that for him, but maybe it's not too late for other young people. Maybe I can help them even if I couldn't help my own son. You seem to be doing a lot, the reporter said. It's not enough, Julian said quietly. It will never be enough, but I'll keep doing it. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for my mistakes, not because I think it will erase what I did, but because it's what Andrew would have wanted. He always wanted to help people. He always wanted to make a difference. This is my way of continuing his legacy. Porter asked a few more questions, then left. Julian stayed where he was, looking up at the mural. "Miss you, son," he whispered. "Every single day, but I see you in the work I do. I see you in the people I help. I see you in the dragon on the wall, soaring free, no one holding you down anymore." A young boy ran by, chasing a ball. He stopped and looked up at the mural. "That's a cool dragon," he said. Julian smiled. "It was my son's favorite thing to draw." "He an artist?" the boy asked. "He was," Julian said. "The best artist I ever knew. I just didn't realize it until it was too late." Boy looked confused. "What do you mean?" Julian knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the child. "You know what?" he said. "You have a dream, whatever it is. Whether you want to be an artist or a musician or a firefighter or a chef. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. Not even your parents. They love you, but sometimes they get confused. They think they know what's best for you. But only you know what's in your heart. You follow that. You hold on to it with everything you've got. Promise me you'll do that." Boy nodded seriously. "I promise." Julian stood up, watching the boy run back to his mother. He thought about the thousands of conversations he'd had since Andrew died, the thousands of people he'd helped, the thousands of times he'd told them not to give up. He knew he couldn't save everyone. He knew he couldn't erase the damage he'd done to his own son, but he could try. He could spend every day trying to be better, trying to be the man Andrew had believed he could be. Before he died, Andrew had said something that stayed with Julian. "I always wanted you, Dad. I just wanted you to love me the way I was, not the way you wanted me to be." Now Julian understood. Love wasn't about control. It wasn't about molding someone into your image. Love was about acceptance. It was about seeing someone for who they truly were and loving them anyway. He had failed Andrew in that way. He had let his pride, his ego, his obsession with success blind him to the beautiful person his son had been. He had spent years trying to change him, and in doing so he had pushed him away, but Andrew had forgiven him. In his final moments he had looked up at his father and said those words, "I forgive you." And that forgiveness had set Julian free, not free from guilt. He would carry that guilt for the rest of his life. But free from the need to punish himself. Free to move forward. Free to try and make things right, even if he could never truly undo the damage. 5 years passed. The Andrew Sterling Foundation grew into one of the most successful homeless outreach programs in the country. Julian was there every day, not just writing checks but actually working alongside the volunteers. He had become a different person. The cold, ruthless businessman was gone. In his place was a warm, gentle old man who had learned the value of compassion. One evening, Julian was sitting in his office at the foundation, going over paperwork when a young woman knocked on the door. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "there's someone here to see you." Julian looked up, confused. It was late and most visitors had already left. "Who is it?" he asked. "You might want to see for yourself." Julian walked out into the main room. Standing there looking nervous but hopeful was a young man of about 25. He had bright blue eyes and a sketchbook under his arm. "Mr. Sterling," the young man said, "my name is David. I don't know if you remember me. You helped me about 5 years ago. I was homeless, working at a shelter. You told me to follow my dreams." Julian searched his memory. Then it came back to him, a young man shivering in the cold, telling Julian he wanted to be a musician. "I remember, Ju."